Hey guys, back with another lesson in the After Effects course. We're going through some of our special effects and presets that I want to show you in particular. I mean, there are so many in our effects and presets window. If you don't see that, bring it up. Go under Window, Effects and Presets. You'll have this list of effects. Today I want to talk about the fractal noise effect, which is a great effect for creating uh, billowy clouds, frothy foam, all sorts of purposes. I've used it for creating clouds, I've used it for creating starry skies, I've used it for creating frothy beer foam. So I've used it for all different things. So let's go ahead and start a new composition. I'll just show you. Fractal, I'll call it fractal noise. Just make this 10 seconds. And I'll just drop down the size so that it renders easily. I'm going to add a new layer. I'm just going to new layer solid. We'll just make it green or blue. I don't think it really matters because once we add our fractal noise effect, which we get by typing in fractal noise or just fractal, clicking and dragging it over, it gets rid of the blue. Now it's just this billowy cloud. I'll put this on full quality so you can see. So this creates kind of like this smokiness, and then it brings up all the different options in your effect editor over here on the left. So if you don't see that, you have this effect controls tab. So you can see there's different types of fractal. So you have like a dynamic, so this is more cloudy, billowy. You have what they call more smeary, and all these things, they'll come up for different purposes. Turbulent, basic. For example, let's just try, this dynamic progressive if we're going to use it for a cloud. You also have the noise type. Again, you have block, linear, which is nice, soft linear, spleen. Spleen is nice for clouds. You can invert the colors, or basically this creates more of, it almost looks like water, which is kind of a nice effect as well. And then contrast, you can add more contrast or less contrast and make it brighter or darker. So we'll add less contrast, maybe brighten it up a little bit. Not that bright, something like that. Down here, transform, you have different transformation tools as well, rotating, and all these things are keyframeable, so you can, change the rotation throughout the composition, or the rotation, all sorts of things. Complexity, you can make it more complex or less complex, and evolution as well can create motion, and that's the one I use for motion. So say we want this cloud to kind of be transforming as time goes on, we set a keyframe for evolution at the start, and at the end we will set a keyframe by we'll type in 1 so that it goes around 360 degrees, the evolution phase. And I'll render this out so you can see, and if you can see, as it's rendering, it slowly is moving and growing. So it's a really cool effect. So this, is the start of our cloud. So for example, if we are going to use clouds, make clouds, let's just take our ellipse tool and create a mask out of it. So I'm just going to make a few circles on this. I'm going to select all my masks, press F to bring up the mask feather, and I'm going to feather it out. When we feather it out, it gets this blue tint around it, and that's because our solid color is blue. So I'm going to go up to Layer, Solid Settings, make that white. So now we have this cloud that, is transforming through the sky. So that's really cool. It's better than just still poof of colors and like a white color. This one is actually dynamic and moving. Say we want to add a blue layer beneath it to act as the sky. Just select a light blue, like this. We'll put it beneath. And as you can see that our cloud has this dark colors in it, so it has the blacks in it, and that's just part of fractal noise. So we're going to have to play with our transfer mode. So we're going to click this toggle switches modes and go to something like, I think multiply will be good. Actually, that does the opposite effect that I want. Lighten will be, it makes it really poofy, gets rid of all the darkness. Screen is good, makes it really light, gets rid of all the black. You can scroll through these by pressing on a Mac keyboard Shift and the plus or minus key buttons. You'll see like overlay is good, hard light. There's some different ones that will work for our purpose of getting rid of this darkness within the cloud, if you don't like that anyways. So we'll go with something like overlay. That'll be good. So it's really light right here, but if we make our background a little bit darker, you'll be able to see our cloud a little bit better. So something like that. But even that, then our overlay might not be the best option. Maybe our screen would be the best option for that cloud. So like I'm doing here, you just have to play around with your different options and come up with something that looks great. And this could be the start of a really great animation of the cloud, sun popping up or something like that, and it's all done with the fractal noise effect. Radial and linear wipes. They're really cool effects that make it really easy to do some cool wipes and transitions. So let's get straight into it. I'm going to add a new layer, solid. Make this something like this blue here. Then I'm going to make a circle using the ellipse tool. And I'm going to make it just perfectly center from the middle by clicking Command and Shift and dragging. So now we have this circle. And this is an effect that I use a lot. Let's first do a radial wipe. So we have, if you type in radial wipe, under transition you have radial wipe. And so once you add this, you have some options up here in the effects control panel. And you'll see that there's transition complete, start angle, wipe center, the wipe option you can choose between clockwise, counterclockwise, or both, and there's feathering. And I'll show you as I increase the percentage of the transition completion, you see that this circle is being wiped. And so we can set keyframes at the start, and then as you bring up keyframes, you can press U on the keyboard to see all the keyframes down here in your timeline. And 1 second, we'll set it to 100%. And there you have a cool radial wipe. We can reverse these keyframes so that the wipe makes the circle appear. We can change it to counterclockwise, and we'll see what that looks like. So it's just the opposite. We can add some feathering to it. And you can do this to any layer. So you can do it to shapes, photos, compositions, really any layer that you want. So there's some feathering if you want. You can change the wipe center. So by clicking this little icon next to the numbers right here, and then moving around the composition, you can like set it down in the bottom corner of your circle or whatever. And let's see what this looks like. Oops, let me undo that. So you see it's coming from, so it's a little bit messed up over here, but it's coming now from the bottom right. It's wiping up. So I like having the wipes come from the center, but maybe you need it to wipe from another part of it. So that is the radial wipe. Let me delete that. Now I'm going to show you the linear wipe. Linear wipe. So again, under transition. Okay, so it's basically the same premise. You have a transition completion percentage, the wipe angle, and feathering. And as you wipe more, have more transition completion, more of your layer disappears. So we'll set a keyframe here, go up half a second or so, turn to 100. And so you'll see that, that's a nice transition as well, and something you can use on, text layers or on anything. You'll see that right here, the transition completion is actually 19%, but 19% of our shape is not completed, or it's still 100% there. So what this percentage actually has to do with is the percentage of the composition. So 19%, maybe about right here. This is 50%, 75%. So once we get to, more like 33 or so, right around here, if we break this composition into thirds, which I'll do with the proportional grid. So this is, about 1/3. You have 1, 2 blocks, or 1, 2, 3 blocks, 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2. So 1/3 is about right there, exactly. So just be aware of that when you are setting your transition completion keyframes. So those are the transition completion, or the linear wipes, and the radial wipes. How you work with After Effects and Premiere and how you can work with them together. Basically, since they're both Adobe programs, they can kind of talk to each other in a digital sense, and it's a great way to work. The workflow is really great when doing so, rather than having to export a QuickTime movie from After Effects, then import then into Premiere Pro. You can basically just bring in a composition and have it be live within Adobe Premiere Pro. So if you edit it in After Effects, it will update in Adobe Premiere Pro without you having to do anything. So how do you do that? So if you're in Adobe Premiere Pro, you can go up to File, Adobe Dynamic Link, and then do New After Effects Composition. And that will open up a new composition within After Effects. But we're coming from After Effects. So if we have a project in After Effects that we want to bring into Adobe Premiere Pro, what we can do is just click and select the composition in your project folder. I have it clicked and I'm holding it clicked. Then you can tab over to Adobe Premiere Pro. So this is a little tricky. On a Mac you press Command Tab. On a PC you would do Control Tab, and it will tab over to Adobe Premiere Pro. Then you just drop it in Adobe Premiere Pro's project viewer. Now we have this Adobe Dynamic linked After Effects composition within Premiere Pro. So you can drop this down onto our composition, or you can drop it and start a new composition with it. So it will open up in a second as it works. Okay, so there we have it in Adobe Premiere Pro. We can render it out, watch it, etc. But say we want to add something in After Effects. We can just easily go back to After Effects. We'll add our title, whatever you want to call it, whatever effect you have. If you need to change something, change the timing. And then when you go back to Adobe Premiere Pro, it will automatically update. Pretty awesome. Say for example you want to create here's another way to create a new composition, a new After Effects project from Adobe Premiere Pro. You can go new item. You can really do any of these, but I usually do black video. I'll put it down on my timeline and then set it for however long I want my After Effects composition to be. Right click, and then if you go down below, it will say replace with After Effects composition, and it will open up a new composition in After Effects. And say we add our text or whatever, text. Let's change the color so you can see it. Text. Okay, and then we go back to Adobe Premiere Pro and it shows up in our composition. So it's all live and easy to edit, and you don't have to export and re-export and import and re-import. About how you use Photoshop and After Effects together. So I'm just going to start a quick composition. We'll just call this Photoshop. And say you want to create an object, or even just like a text layout or title design or something like that, but you work with Photoshop better, or you already have a Photoshop file or a project that you want to work on in Photoshop while you work on it in After Effects. Well, it's really easy to do that. In our After Effects, if you go up to File, New, and then Adobe Photoshop File, it will ask you where you want to save it. We'll just call this test. And then it will open up Photoshop, and it will open up a file that is the exact size of your composition, which is really great because it's way easier than trying to figure out what the size of your composition is and then going back and inputting the pixels or things like that. This automatically does it. So now we can go into Photoshop, which, who knows, maybe you're a little bit more familiar with. We can create our shapes or textures or layers or compositions or whatever we want, and then basically when you're done with your composition, so say let me just give you a practical example of what this would look like. So I'm just gonna move that down there. Okay, so I'm gonna take some black circles and quickly I need to create a new layer, delete this other one. Now take my shape tool, and of course if you don't know how to use Photoshop, then you're gonna have to learn how to use Photoshop. I'm gonna create a new layer, another circle, and I'm gonna create two Mickey ears. So now we have a Mickey Mouse. And maybe for you it was easier to create it in Photoshop than After Effects. So then we save this, then we go back to our After Effects project, and you will see test is here in our project folder. And now you can just bring in your Photoshop project. Say you need to make changes, then we can do that. You can add a nose or whatever you want, and then let's just add a couple eyes. This does not look like Mickey at all, but you get the point. Save it again, then go back to our After Effects, make sure we save it, and then go back to our After Effects, and then we should be able to right click our test right here in the project file, do reload footage, and it will update it to whatever the latest version is that you saved. And it's a great way to work with Photoshop and After Effects together. You don't have to save out the Photoshop file and then import and then resave another PNG or JPEG or whatever it is. You can just work within Photoshop and After Effects at the same time. Pre-composing. So as you know, we're working in compositions, and a pre-composition means It's basically working with compositions within compositions. So in After Effects, we have all our layers, but we can actually add other compositions into our timeline. So for example, we have this 3D camera composition. We could just bring this right in to our timeline, and then from here we can just go ahead and double click it to edit this composition. Whatever we did do to that composition will appear in our other composition. So it's basically layers of compositions. But to pre-compose means we can select certain parts of a composition and turn it into its own composition. And I think the best way to do it is to show you how you do it. So whatever parts you want to pre-compose, for example, in this composition, it would be great to pre-compose these 3 layers of grass in the front as one image. So we can select the layers, right click, and then click pre-compose. It will ask you to name your pre-composition, and it will also ask you to move all attributes into the new composition. Yes, you want that. You can have it open automatically or not, and we'll do that. So it opens automatically, and now we have this composition with just our grass. If we want to go back to our other composition, now our grass is all in one layer, and this really cleans it up. Rather than having 3 layers of grass, now it's just 1 layer. We can color coordinate this, make it green so you know that's the grass, etc. We can also do that with the clouds, for example. Another way to pre-compose is by pressing Command-Shift-C on a Mac or Control-Shift-C on a PC. We'll do clouds. So now we have a composition with just clouds. Say we can also pre-compose all of this into a composition, and we'll call this the doghouse animation. And why would we do that? So we'll go back to our practice. Now we can, do something interesting with this composition. We can put it in, make it smaller, and maybe add a new layer, solid. We'll do a new, maybe something a little bit goldish, beige, orange, something like this. Put it underneath our doghouse. Now we can decrease the size. We can add a drop shadow by right-clicking, layer style, drop shadow, or whatever you want. Then we can add text up above. This is your story, whatever you want. Maybe you title your composition. Make it black. And now our doghouse composition is in this little box. So it's kind of cool. And you can add all sorts of other effects if you want. But that is what pre-composing is and what a pre-composition is. And it's just a basic way to, or more advanced way to organize your footage. Motion tracking, something that is an awesome tool that After Effects is. After Effects is an awesome tool for motion tracking, and so I have this clip right here. I'm going to bring it up from San Francisco, and we have this bus. We have this bus going by the Golden Gate Bridge. Let's watch it one more time. So say this is an ad for the tour bus company, and they want to track this bus and maybe add a little bit of text or something above this bus. Well, I'm going to show you how you do that. So I imported it into my After Effects. Actually, I'll just show you exactly how I do that. Click, drag, drop, rename by pressing Enter, pressing San Fran. Then I'm going to drop this into a new composition by just clicking it and dragging it over this Create a New Composition button. You have to make sure that your tracker is open down here in the right corner. So make sure you go up to Window, Tracker. And then I'm just going to shorten my work area to about 5 seconds, to about where this bus is, or maybe 4 seconds. This clip is only going to be 4 seconds long because I only want to track it until the bus is right there. Obviously, if this was a real issue, I would have had a better shot of the bus going across the bridge with it being clearer. And so I hope this is going to work, but see, it's very foggy. It's not too detailed, and we got these poles sticking up, so we're going to see how the tracker works. But I'm going to bet you that it's going to work great. So the next thing you want to do is add a new null object, and if you remember from our 3D camera lesson, a null object is an imaginary object that we're just going to place into our composition. And why we're going to do that is because when we track our motion, basically we'll set a point on our bus, and then across time it will track it as it goes down the highway, and it will set a keyframe for each of those points. And you'll see when I do this in a second. But then you have to do something with those points. You can either apply them to a layer, such as a text box or an icon that you want flying over this bus or doing whatever, or you can apply it to a null object, and the null object you can then parent a layer of text or an object to your null object. So that's a lot of information, and I'm sure you're very, very confused. So let me just show you what I'm doing. So first you have to go to your tracker down here, and I'm going to click track motion. So it brings up this new box, and it has this little track point option right here. So I'm going to, you see there's a plus sign and two squares. The inner square is basically the object that you want to track. You want to put the point exactly where on the specific object you want to track, and then the square box around whatever else is moving. And then this outer box it serves to basically digest whatever information is going on outside of this box and determine whether it needs to move this track point or not. So let me show you. So you click and move, and you can see it creates the zoomed in version for you. So I'm going to put it over this bus. You can see here I'm just going to put it over the top of our bus because that is easily seen throughout our video piece. So I'm gonna make this a little bit smaller. The bigger the box is, the more time it's going to take to render. I'm gonna edit target down here, and then it brings up this motion target box, layer null 4. Yes, I want the target to be null 4. Then what you want to do is analyze, and I just usually press this analyze forward. You can do analyze one frame forward at a time, but I just do analyze forward, this play button, and we'll see what it does. And as you can see, it's moving with the bus right now as the time goes by. So it's going to keep analyzing and track that bus as it goes down along the Golden Gate Bridge. So let's keep going. And as you can see here, the wind is blowing in the trees, so it was a very windy day. When I went to San Francisco, I actually went to the Golden Gate Bridge twice, 2 days in a row, and both days it was foggy, and you still couldn't see anything. So it was kind of a bummer, but I'm going to be moving up there soon, so I'll be able to get good views of that. So there you have it. You see all these track points, they appear up here in your viewer, and also if you drop down this menu and you drop down motion trackers and then tracker 1 and then track point 1, you can see that it has created keyframes for all these points, and basically it's tracking the motion. I'm going to then do apply, press apply, and that's going to bring up this option, and it says apply dimension to X and Y, and that's going to apply it to the null object. So it's going to basically copy these keyframes to the null object, and so the null object is going to move along with this tracker. Obviously that's all imaginary right now, but then you can do you can either just do the X and Y axis trackers or just X only, so it'll only go across but it won't go up and down with the bus, or Y only, it will only go up and down, but not across the composition. Do X and Y. So now our null object has a position keyframes on it, and it goes across as it goes across the bridge. The null object, you can see here, this red square, although it's imaginary, it is represented by this red square. It goes across the bridge. Alright, so that is a lot of information, and that is how you track motion. Let's talk about another advanced technique you can use After Effects for. We're going to stabilize some footage, something that most amateur and most professional filmmakers have to deal with on a constant basis: shaky footage. And After Effects can help you. So, for example, in San Francisco, I took this shot of these sea lions out in the harbor. So let's take a look at it. As you can see, it's shaking up and down. You know, you got the nice motion of the sea lions sitting on the dock, but it's shaky, and that's kind of annoying. It just makes me look amateur. But I'm going to make myself look like a pro now. So I brought it into my After Effects composition, and I put it into a new composition. As you can see here, it's still shaky. Easy solution: make sure that your tracker window is open, just like we were using to track motion. Then you just click the Stabilize Motion button. It's going to analyze it and basically do it automatically. And I already did this, so I'm going to show you what it looks like after it analyzes. It'll take a couple minutes, it'll go frame by frame, and basically how it does it is that it tracks certain points and it will smooth it out by moving this video up and down or rotating it so that it looks like it's still. So let me show you okay, so here is the analyzed footage, and it'll render out, and there you have it, nice and smooth, no up and down shaking motion, a little bit of a nice tilt up and down. And let me show you the original again. Lots of up and down shaking, no bueno. This is bueno, perfecto. And you know, you can change these settings. You can make it more smooth or less smooth. So I'm gonna make it, let's see what happens when I do 127% smoothness and render it out. You can change how it smooths with the framing. And here, you know, 127%, it looks even smoother. So it's really awesome. So you could change this to stabilize only, you can stabilize crop, stabilize synthesize edges. Stabilize crop auto scale is the automatic one that it chooses, and it's probably the best, I would say. You could do different methods as well. You can do position, scale, rotation, and this does a good job as well. So let's render it out and see what it looks like. So again, almost identical. But for different shots, you're going to have to play around with the different options. And see here, there's the result. You can choose smooth motion or no motion. Sorry for the dogs and the sirens in the background. But basically, you know, there's so many different options. This one, there's no motion. You don't see any up or down motion of the camera. So that if you want that kind of shot, you can get that kind of shot. Lighting in After Effects. After Effects has a lot of different options for adding lights to our compositions, and you can do a lot of things with them. Basically, if you're creating 3D environments, you can light different objects. It's basically like creating a set in virtual reality, or you can just use it to light 2D videos or compositions in interesting ways. So let me show you how to do that. So first, I have this image of this rabbit that I photographed in Joshua Tree, California when I was camping there recently. And so I just laid this photo into our composition. Before we add lights, we have to make sure that whatever layers we want affected by the lights are turned on to 3D. So they're 3D layers. So click that cube right there. Then go up to Layer, New, Light. And you'll get this dialog box with the options for the lights, and you can name it whatever you want. And then there's different types of lights: spot, parallel, point, and ambient. Basically, let's start off with the spot, and we'll go through the rest later, but the spot is the main one you're going to be using. Ambient will basically add light to the entire composition at once in an even way, but spot, parallel, and point have some interesting forms of the light. You can change the color of the light, but for now I'm just going to use white light. You can change the intensity, and all these things you can change later. So I'm just going to leave all of these, and we can see what it looks like. So there you have our spotlight. And when you add it, it comes down here to our timeline, and as you probably could guess, you can keyframe any of these options. So the intensity, the color, the angle, all of those things. One thing to notice is this light that is added in our composition. This isn't actually going to be seen in our composition if we export it, but it is there for us to easily edit while editing in After Effects. So we can kind of click this light and move it around. So there is the positioning of it. So this green, blue, and red arrows, these are for positioning it. So you can move it, left, right, along the x-axis, up or down, or with the z-axis, you can move it back further away or closer to our composition. There is also the point of interest. So this is basically where it is pointing, and that's this little blue dot with the line connected to the light. And you can get to that through the transform tools down here. You see this point of interest as well as the position and all the rotation as well. So you can change it that way if you don't want to just click within your composition. Also, let's look at the different things you can do with the light, such as cone angle. You can make it wider or more narrow. You can make it more or less feathered. You can change the fall off to be more of a squared or smooth fall off. You can also change the radius of it all, and the fall off distance, and you can turn shadows on. We'll talk about that another time, and these other options have to do with the shadows as well. So the main things you want to look at are the cone angle, which is how wide or big your light is actually, and the cone feathering, and the intensity as well, because you can turn down the intensity if you want. You can even go above 100, which starts to make whatever the image is or the subject of our light, it starts to overexpose it if it goes over 100%. So one cool thing that I like to do is just set up compositions with cool, unique lighting. So let's try to do something like that, and I'll show you some cool lighting setups. So say we just want this bunny on the side of our composition lit up. So we can, put our light up in the middle, up above, and then put the point of interest, right where our rabbit is. And this is pretty cool. Lighting, maybe we want to have text over here on the right or something like that. We can animate the point of interest, so we'll go into the transform tools, we'll set a keyframe right there. That's where we want the light to end up, so we'll move that to about 1 second. Then we'll move it maybe over here so it looks like it's searching. at the start of our composition. And then what we're going to do as well as in our light options, we're going to keyframe the intensity. So about halfway through this movement, so at 1 second or half a second, we'll have the intensity be 100%. But at the start, we'll just keep it at, we'll lower it to 0. So it kind of appears. Now let's render this out and see what this looks like. So there you have it, our light kind of scanning the ground and finding our rabbit. So that's pretty cool. Or if you don't, if you're not necessarily adding lights with motion, you can just have a cool setup. Let's change the intensity to 100. And you just have cool lighting throughout the entire composition. So maybe you want some sort of vignetting. So let's sometimes it helps to decrease the size of your composition. Going over to this 100%, you can make it 50% so you can see more and move the light into more unique places. So maybe we want the light to be down below, coming from below. Something like this. And then we can decrease the cone angle. Just play around with it. So, you get the idea. It's, again, something you just have to play around with. And figure out what lighting setup you want. I hope you're enjoying these lessons. If you have any questions about the lighting in After Effects, please let me know. But for now, I'm just going to let you play with it. But let me quickly show you the other lights. So we can change this light. So for example, let me just make this a little bit bigger. We'll put this at 100%. Then I'm just going to change it to parallel. And so this is basically very wide light. So it has different, this is kind of a different effect than the spotlight. You can choose the point, which is also similar to parallel. It's wider than the spotlight. This one you can change the width by changing the radius. And then you have ambient, which is basically just complete. It affects the entire composition, and it's just for adding, making your composition a little bit brighter. Say you want, one reason you would do this is, say you want the whole thing lit up, but you also want a spotlight on our rabbit. So you want to be able to see everything, but you want the rabbit to be the main thing that you see. Then you can add a second light. We'll shine the spotlight down on our rabbit, something like that. And there, unlike before where we didn't have the ambient light, where it was just the spotlit rabbit, now you can see the rest of the composition, but you can also, the rabbit is highlighted. You can turn down the ambience or not, or turn it up. But of course, you have to be careful because when you're adding multiple lights together, you can get things to parts of your composition to be overexposed. As you can see here, it's getting too bright because it's adding both lights together. So we'll turn that down. So as you can probably tell, there's lots of things you can do with lights, and there's lots to learn, but it really takes playing around with them and just practicing. So get to it and let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.